In this video, we're going to talk about solving more trig equations. All right, so pretty much for any type of equation, when something's slightly more complicated is going on, our first step is to isolate that complicated thing. So examples of this are if you're working with square roots, exponentials, logarithms, absolute values, anytime there's kind of like a weird thing going on, you want to get that thing by itself to its simplest form and then apply some property to it. And it's not going to be any different with sine and cosine. Pretty much the only thing we've talked about, which is a new type of equation that doesn't require you to isolate it, is the quadratic equations. That's when you get everything to one side and 0 on one side. So really those are like the odd one out. Pretty much everything else, it's like get this thing by itself first because it's complicated, and then solve it. So we're going to do the same thing with sine and cosine. We have this kind of complicated thing, sine and an equation, so let's get it by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 1 to both sides. And I forgot the 2 in front of it. All right, so I just got rid of the 1, and I need to divide by 2, so that's going to cancel out. Give me 1/2. Right. And now this problem should look really familiar. It's just like the last lesson. Sine of x equals 1/2. Sine is the y value, which happens in 2 places. I actually think we solved this exact problem before. Pi over 6 plus 2 pi k. X equals 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi k. All right, so just like with absolute values, just like with square roots, just like with exponentials, pretty much most of the time, the idea is isolate this thing, get it by itself, and then you end up using some property of that thing. The property you're using for sine and cosine is the unit circle. All right, 3 cosine of x plus 6 equals 0. Again, same thing, subtract 6 from both sides. Divide by 3. And now the cosine is by itself. Cosine or sine just being equal to a number is our goal. Cosine being negative 1/2. X value is negative 1/2 there and there. Our solutions are 2 pi over 3 plus 2 pi k. And 4 pi over 3 is kind of the initial one. And then all of its coterminal angles as well. All right, make sure you're getting all solutions. All right, this one looks a lot more complicated. Now we have this squared. Again, this is a pretty complicated thing. So chances are you just want to isolate this thing first and then figure out what we want to do. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. Divide both sides by 4. And now we have 2 different things. We have the squared and we have the sine. The squared's happening kind of on the outside of the sine, so we can cancel out the squared by taking the square root of both sides. The square root and the squared cancel, and I just get sine. All right, this is something from a long time ago, but it's really important to remember just in general. Whenever you take the square root of an equation, you get a plus or minus. And then we're getting plus or minus the square root of 3 over 4. I can split up square roots over division. And then I can simplify one of those square roots to 2. So this one, again, didn't really know where to start, but I might as well isolate the complicated thing. And once this thing's by itself, I see, oh, I can get rid of one piece. I can get rid of the squared by using square roots. We've done that before. And now sine of x is positive or negative square root of 3 over 2. So where else all the places that happens? Happens there, happens there, happens there, happens there. Happens 4 different times. So my answer is going to take a little bit of time to write out. We have pi over 3 and all of its coterminal angles. We have 2 pi over 3. And all of its coterminal angles. You kind of see where this is going. 4 pi over 3 and all of its coterminal angles. And 5 pi over 3 and all of its coterminal angles. All right, so that is our final solution. Again, just looking at this problem, you wouldn't necessarily know how to do it right away, but the idea of isolating, getting things by itself first, and kind of figuring out where you can go from there would lead you to this final answer. And the only common mistake I would see is missing these 2 answers because you forgot your plus or minus. All right, here's one for you to try on your own. All right, go ahead and try this problem, and I'll show you the answer in 3, 2, 1. And here's the answer that you get. All right, isolate. Notice you get 1/2 for a lot of these problems because that's like the easiest thing to make happen. But cosine is negative 1/2. We find those 2 x's is negative 1/2, and I get our answers. and making sure to include their coterminal angles as well. I just remember, as with most things, pretty much other than quadratics, you want to isolate that difficult part first, and the difficult part of this is there's a trig function in the equation, so isolate that first. Once you do that, then use the unit circle and make sure you get all solutions.